Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Penvic. Lovely to see you, and thank you for joining us for our Bible talk for today. If you find these talks helpful, don't forget to like or to share the messages with your friends at the bottom of the screen so everyone can enjoy them as well. We're in the Gospel of John, and in chapter 11, the big one, the big miracle, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. But we're doing it in three sections, and just to remind you where we got to after yesterday. Jesus has gone away from Judea, the sort of Jerusalem area, because they've been out. The authorities were going to stone him to death, so quite understandably he makes a bit of a tactical withdrawal, you might say. But while he's away, his friend Lazarus, who has two sisters, Martha and Mary, who live in Bethany, which is in Judea, very close to Jerusalem, only a couple of miles away, their brother Lazarus is dying. And Martha and Mary are so worried about Lazarus, they go away and find Jesus and tell him that Lazarus is dying, and then presumably they come back home. Jesus doesn't come for a couple of days, but eventually he sets off on his way. And when he gets back to Bethany, to the house of Martha, Mary and Lazarus, of course, he finds that Lazarus has already died. And this, you might say, is the reception committee that meets Jesus when he arrives. So without further ado, John chapter 11, I'm starting to read at verse 17. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "If you'd been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." When she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews came with her also, who came with her also weeping, he was deeply disturbed in spirit and greatly moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, it's an incredible reading, this one, and there's so much I can get out from it. But I just want to bring out 4 things really. So, Jesus arrives quite close to Bethany, but not Bethany itself. And when he's nearly there, he meets Martha, the one sister. And it's interesting, when Jesus arrives there, he finds that Lazarus has already been in the tomb 4 days. In other words, John is very clear to tell us here that Jesus has been dead 4 days. Now, we can speculate about this, but I think the reason for this is John wants to make abundantly clear, and I guess Jesus wants it to be abundantly clear as well, because he could have come back sooner. John wants us to know that Lazarus, before being raised, had properly died, that he'd been in the tomb for 4 days. So there's no ambiguity about it. Jesus wanted us to know, and John wants us to know, the writer of the gospel, that Lazarus had properly died. In other words, Jesus did not resuscitate him, did not wake him up or anything like that. Lazarus was dead. Lazarus had properly died. So when Jesus rose him from the dead, like I said, he wasn't just waking him up, he wasn't just giving him the kiss of life or anything like that. Lazarus had died. Lazarus had properly died, thus demonstrating undeniably Jesus' power over death. For Jesus to do that, Lazarus had to die. And leaving him in the tomb 4 days makes it abundantly clear that, without any reasonable doubt, that Lazarus had died first. So that's the first thing. Then there's the reaction of Martha when she meets Mary, and actually meets Jesus. And actually, Mary's similar. They both say the same thing: "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died." And I think especially with Martha, you've got to kind of feel the exasperation. She's angry with Jesus. I think she's cross with him. She says very, very strongly that if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. In other words, couldn't you have got your skates on? Couldn't you have got an earlier train, you know? Could you not? Because had you got a bit earlier, my brother would not have died. But what is interesting here really is that even though she is cross with Jesus, she doesn't actually stop believing in him. You know, she still believes in him even though she's cross with him. And I think there's something very important here about faith, that we can believe in God even though sometimes we can get exasperated that things don't always happen the way we want. You know, things can happen in life that can make us angry, and we don't understand why. And because we don't understand, we can get angry, and we can be angry with God at times. But it doesn't stop us believing. I think that's really important to say. We can be frustrated and angry that, you know, people we know die, or, you know, difficult situations, or whatever it will be. And we can be angry and we can express our anger to God, but it doesn't stop us believing. I remember somebody years ago who asked me to baptize their son. And he said to me, I've fallen out with God. And I assumed from that he meant he didn't believe. And he said, no, it's not that. He said to me, you haven't listened to me properly. I didn't say I didn't believe. He said, I've fallen out with God. His mother had died when he was 9, and he found that, understandably, very difficult to handle. So it wasn't that he didn't believe in God. He did believe in God, but he'd kind of fallen out with God. And I think there's something very important here about faith. That faith does not mean that we kind of don't get exasperated at times. That we don't have things that we feel very passionate about, or we can thump the pillow about and get angry with God about at times. But God's got very broad shoulders, but it doesn't stop us believing. Martha she was angry with Jesus for not coming earlier, because she said, if you'd come earlier, my brother would not have died. She was angry with him, but it didn't stop her believing in him. I think that's the second thing. So the first thing was Jesus had to show by waiting 4 days that Lazarus had properly died, so he can properly bring him back to life again. Secondly, as part of our faith, we can fall out with God, but it doesn't mean that we don't still believe in God. I think that's important, the second thing. The third thing is about the faith of Martha. She says, I believe that Jesus talks about the last day, and he will rise again. And Martha says, I know he will rise again at the resurrection, at the last day. So in other words, she believes that there is life after death. She believes that there is the resurrection. She believes that there is hope. But what she hasn't quite managed at this stage is that Jesus says, I am the resurrection and I am the life. That it isn't just some thing in the future for Martha to understand for her brother. Actually, Jesus is the resurrection. He is life after death. It isn't just believing in life after death as some sort of thing, actually that might going to happen one day. But Jesus actually personalizes it. And by raising Lazarus from the dead, shows it for Martha as well. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. Not that it will happen that there will be life after death, or it's not just some sort of airy-fairy thing like that. But Jesus says, I am the resurrection and I am the life. And so in him, he is life, both in life and after death too. Life and resurrection life is found in Jesus. There's not just some airy-fairy thing one day, but actually he is the resurrection and he is the life. But finally, it will be remiss of me not to mention the compassion of Jesus later, that she then meets her sister Mary, and Mary gives a similar response to Jesus. And Jesus sees the hurt of the sisters feel. And Jesus sees the hurt of the people around. And even though Jesus, of course, knows the happy end of the story, Jesus knew that what he was going to do. When he sees the hurt of the people, it says, in the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Or my version actually says, Jesus began to weep. And actually, Jesus is moved by our pain. That Jesus is not unmovable. Jesus is not, untouchable in that respect. Jesus loves us, and Jesus is moved by our pain, so that when we hurt, he hurts too. He's not impervious to pain and suffering. He's in there, right in there with us, in it, and he is moved by it, and he cares about us, and he's counted our tears in his bottle, and he's with us, and he wants to love us and support us when we feel pain too. So, this wonderful, powerful reading of the raising of Lazarus, what does it tell us? Firstly, by waiting 4 days to prove that Jesus proved that Lazarus was properly dead in order that he could be properly raised and show his power over death. Secondly, it's possible to fall out with God without necessarily not believing him anymore. Thirdly, Jesus is the resurrection of life, not just some sort of airy-fairy thing, but he himself, he is the resurrection and the life, and showed it by raising Lazarus. And finally, we have the compassion of Jesus, that Jesus wept when he saw the hurt of the people of Martha, Mary, and the people around. And Jesus is not immovable. There's a beating heart in the heart of God, and it's Jesus, and it's for you and for me. Have a lovely weekend. Do join us at church. We'd love to see you.